for today, Tuesday, July 19th. If I could get a motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
The minutes have a motion for approval and seconded. They will stand without objection. Today, we have a couple of items we needed to go over. And I do see a noise ordinance listed under item 3. I did reach out to Dr. Burrs, and I think she's fine to keep working on that. That is something that's not ready to come off the back burner, so to speak. So if you'll make note of that. The other 2 items that we have today is the American Rescue Plan presentation and also a presentation by Dr. Lambert on violence prevention. Joda, I will defer to you if you would, whether or not you'd like Dr. Lambert to go first or not. I don't think it really.
I think I can go first. And I know that I'm not sure if there's a scheduling mishap around the Dr. Lambert piece. Brooke, can you just check in with her? I did not have an anticipated, the administration did not have an anticipated presentation for the violence reduction piece, as we are anticipating having some community discussions on Monday about a violence reduction roadmap. But I'm happy to provide you kind of an update on where we stand with that. But we may need to reschedule Dr. Lambert. I had planned on providing a robust American Rescue Plan presentation that should take up quite a bit of time regardless. So,
well, I'm more than happy if council is happy with when Dr. Lambert's ready to do that.
That's great.
We will be happy to accommodate. I'm not seeing any objection to that. So, all right.
Perfect.
So I will turn it over to you, and the floor is yours.
Great. Could I get the presentation pulled up? Thank you.
I'm assuming we will have a slide presentation.
Yes, you should have it on your screens now. Well, thank you, Council, for allowing me to present the American Rescue Plan, or what we are calling our Relief and Recovery Plan. I want to quickly review a couple of things before I get into the presentation. One is that the funding provided from the American Rescue Plan that we are talking about today is just one facet of the American Rescue Plan dollars provided to the city of Chattanooga. Particularly, these are the state and local fiscal relief funds that were provided to cities, and cities at a certain size were directly allocated resources from the federal government and not through the state. And those are the dollars that we are talking about here today. I will preface all of this by saying we have quite a bit to get through. We have over 36 different subrecipient organizations proposed in these recommended allocation plan, and I would like to spend some time on each one of them. So if we do not get through all of that today, I'm perfectly happy to move on and cover that in the next strategic planning session. But I did want to make sure we had a thorough presentation for each of you. So really quickly, I want to cover some of the values that guided this process from the very beginning. Mayor Kelly, even before he was elected mayor during the campaign, committed that whenever he was allocating these resources, he was going to make a intentional focus, ensure that these dollars were spent with an intentional focus on equity and disproportionately affected communities. And this did not just reflect the priorities of the emerging One Chattanooga plan, but also the guidance that we received from the federal government and the Treasury Department on what were allowed uses of the dollars, but then also what were the encouraged uses of the dollars through things like the which census tracts for disadvantaged communities were highlighted by the Treasury Department from the very beginning. Additionally, because these are one-time dollars, the administration prioritized catalytic impact over existing operational funding. And what I mean by that is that we were looking to fund projects that would be best suited for this one-time funding as opposed to ongoing operational funding, which isn't to say that we weren't going to fund any operational funding, but rather that when we had the opportunity to fund catalytic projects, we were going to do that, or we were going to weight those projects higher. And we did do exactly that in the recommended proposal that is before you. The majority of the projects are catalytic projects, but then also we made sure that in the operational projects that we funded, that we were taking a pilot approach to test new ideas that could help us better understand what we should be operationally funding in the future. Next is that we wanted to make sure this process was accessible for smaller community-rooted organizations. This is part of Mayor Kelly's commitment to make sure that we were funding organizations that weren't just the same suspects over and over again. And I think that in your recommended packet, what you'll find is that while there are a small handful of larger organizations, particularly on the housing side, which is a complex process that we really needed that expertise on, we also made sure to include some smaller organizations that have historically never received funding from an entity like the city of Chattanooga. And we also sort of similarly wanted to take calculated risks on high impact ideas. This was really important to the mayor because, again, if we kept doing the same thing that we've always done, we were going to get the same results. And the mayor was very clear with us internally and very clear with the Equitable Recovery Commission, and I'll cover that here in a second, that he wanted to see bold ideas included in this funding packet. And we also wanted to provide a real opportunity for community input into the priorities and community access to the funding. I can confidently say this is the most transparent, accessible American Rescue Plan of funding process in the county, certainly. And we opened up funding to organizations through a public application process. And I believe we are one of the only cities in the region to do that. This had the byproduct of making sure that smaller minority-led organizations were able to compete in this process. And then finally, we really wanted to weight proximity to the problem, or what the mayor would say is, organizations that are close to and in the communities they are looking to serve. So being proximate to the problem really mattered to us when we went through the selection process. So from the beginning, this process was guided and informed by what the mayor launched called the Chattanooga Equitable Recovery Commission. And that was comprised of 12 community members and leaders selected by Mayor Kelly in collaboration with 2 area partners, the Urban League of Greater Chattanooga and the Chamber of Commerce, particularly given that we were focused on closing economic gaps in our community, and those 2 organizations were critical in that work. The Chattanooga Equitable Recovery Commission did not select or evaluate any projects. I want to make that very clear. The Equitable Recovery Commission simply weighted priorities and spending areas. They never were able to review individual applications, and we did this intentionally to make sure that the Equitable Recovery Commission was not designed to be a place where you could steer funding towards your preferred organization, but rather to say, in the tough choices between choosing, let's say, between affordable housing or public safety, that there was going to be some community input into the process. And the Equitable Recovery.
Can I interrupt you?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
I apologize. I see Councilman Henderson's light.
Absolutely. And this is a conversation, so I'd love to have questions as you have them.
Could we get, and I don't know if they're listed later, but could we get a list of who those
That's my next slide.
Okay. All right.
There we go.
Ahead of you. Okay, great. Thanks.
Already in your head.
Can I get the winning lottery numbers there, Councilman? Thank you.
So this is we will send this presentation to you all immediately following the strategic planning session. So this is the list of 12 individuals that were on the Equitable Recovery Commission that did meet a total of 8 times, and they offered a recommendation for a framework for these investments on Tuesday, April 26th, and then 3 days later, Mayor Kelly adopted that framework with some modifications. The primary modification was to increase the overall allotment provided for housing. But these are the individuals that were on the Equitable Recovery Commission, and these were selected in partnership with the Urban League and the Chamber. So, and again, I just want to reiterate, please jump in with questions as you have them. I want this to be a dialogue and a conversation. In developing the plan, I want to kind of quickly walk through the timeline. This was an intentional and long process that allowed a lot of input, but also raised expectations. And I think that that is one of the tensions whenever, the mayor decided not to go the route of simply hand-picking a selection of key priorities himself without any input, but rather to go to the community and say, what are the great ideas that you all have, is that it required some extra time. So starting in October, we opened the initial funding requests and the Equitable Recovery Commission applications, which is we initially took applications for the Equitable Recovery Commission. And then we announced the roster of Equitable Recovery commissioners on January 26th. I won't go through every item on this timeline, but suffice it to say, this was lengthy, intentional, and involved. The process for actually submitting applications was a two-step process. People submitted initial inquiries and then received feedback from the city saying whether or not this would be federally allowable or not, and whether or not we recommended they proceed to the final stage. And this was intentionally designed to make sure that folks had the feedback they needed to improve their applications before the final stage.
Joe, if I may ask a question.
Yeah.
Because that was a really interesting point you just made. So we did hear some criticism, obviously, last week. And from what I'm able to piece together, that a lot of people may have applied, but they may not have been under the guidelines or qualified, and you had to sift through those.
Yes. So
Okay.
we did provide for folks who did go through the initial application period, which was not required. You could submit just to the final application, but for folks who went through the two-step process, we did provide feedback, basically saying, hey, we do not recommend you proceed because that would be a waste of your time. This is not federally eligible, or this does meet eligibility, but we do have some concerns, or this is a strong application, and while we can't guarantee funding, we would like you to proceed with the final application.
Okay. So we did communicate as the city being back to applicants to make sure that they understood that either did not qualify or had some concerns.
That's right.
But-
And we did also, we were also responsive to questions about, specifically how they could create a more competitive application. They had access to technical assistance through the process. This was a robust application period, but also there was assistance available for organizations that wanted to make sure their application was competitive. And we were very clear about what we were looking for. And I'm proud to say this administration stuck to those not only requirements, but the priorities that we set out.
Do you know if any of those that maybe not have qualified or had concerns were redirected or noted so that they may be even possibly redirected into a different channel?
Yeah, so we have actually made a number of recommendations to our RFP process, for example,
what I was
which was
alluding to,
a great fit for some more operationally oriented
Okay.
funding requests. And then also we're in the process of preparing right now a list of applications we both did not fund and then applications we did fund to go to our philanthropic partners that we would recommend to them for either a matching contribution to the project or initiative or to supplant our funding that we did not provide.
Great. Thank you for that.
Mhm. I want to talk briefly about the ways that we evaluated projects. So these were just a couple of the dimensions that were outlined in the notice of funding opportunity that was published prior to anybody being able to submit a final application. We told everybody how they were going to be evaluated ahead of time. And there were a couple of key things. One, probably the most important one, was that you had to be federally compliant. These are dollars that are federal in nature, and we have very specific guidelines on how we could spend them. And we are partnered with a firm called UHY, as well as the assistance from our grants and opportunities team to evaluate the compliance and eligibility of the applications themselves. So they went through that process or are going through that process. We had to finalize some final information requests for some of the projects. The second piece is related to the federal compliance, which is that the projects needed to be completed within a certain time period outlined by the federal requirements. These dollars really need to be encumbered by the end of 2024. So these were not projects that could go on forever. They had to be time limited in nature. This is where things get a little bit more subjective, but we had a process to score and evaluate on these metrics as well. One was, do the projects meet the framework outlined by the Chattanooga Equitable Recovery Commission and then adopted by the mayor? Are we committing to funding the things that we said we were going to fund? Did they have a clear plan for integrating racial equity and inclusion in their project? We provided a small bonus for smaller organizations to make sure that we were weighting toward community and minority-led organizations to make sure that smaller organizations that didn't have access to a team of grant writers weren't getting boxed out of the process. We recognized that some of the best applications that we got just in terms of written material were actually, of course, from organizations that were able to pay a lot of consultants to make sure that those applications were excellent. But that didn't always mean those were the best ideas or the most impactful ideas. It just meant they weren't quite as polished. The budget item, which is, just to make sure, like from the budgetary, like, is the impact for the overall money requested worth it? And then also, did they include a complete budget in their proposal? There were several applications that did not include a robust budget. And then, did they come to this application process with other external resources in hand? We had several projects that we did fund that were entirely funded by the city of Chattanooga through this process. But it certainly made your project more competitive if you brought foundation dollars or other external funding sources along with you. And even having a plan to go get other funding sources was an important thing for us to see. Any questions on these evaluation components? Okay. So as I think the chairman alluded to, this was a highly competitive process. There were over $200 million in requests for about $30 million in available funding. That is a tremendous amount of money that was being requested. And it was a byproduct of the fact that we requested applications. And I think that's exactly what we wanted to see. We wanted to have a menu of options to recommend to you all. And the administration really worked to ensure a variety of organizations received funding while maximizing impact. We did not take the approach of, let's go give it to the maximum number of organizations and spread it as thin as possible. We really wanted to balance, okay, let's make sure that we have a wide variety of organizations, but those organizations have enough money to make a difference in their communities. At the end of the day, just 13% of the funding volume was actually awarded. But we were able to partially or wholly fund 31% of the applications by trimming and consolidating some applications. So several, if not the vast majority of applications, did not get the full amount they requested. We went back and reduced those amounts and checked with the organizations to see if they would be able to pursue their goals and achieve what they set out to achieve with reduced funding. And we allowed them to reduce the overall scope in some cases, but also in many cases, they said, look, we asked for a robust amount of money, acknowledging that and anticipating that we were going to get a haircut, but we are going to go out and find additional funding to try and make this work. And certainly whenever the city of Chattanooga steps in with funding, that is kind of like a good housekeeping seal of approval. Whenever I was previously at the Community Foundation, I saw the power of an institution stepping behind an organization, and the city of Chattanooga is, our city seal holds a lot of weight. And so a lot of organizations are going to be able to successfully close the gaps where we had to reduce funding amounts. And essentially over 200 plus initial applications, and there were about 100 applications in the final stage, and we ultimately proceeded with about 36 of them. So something I know that this body cares quite a bit about and has been the discussion around our budget as well, which is how we are handling accountability and compliance. That is both one, accountability to make sure that the community is getting its money's worth, but then also compliance to make sure the city's not at risk whenever we do grant out these resources to other organizations. So all subrecipient organizations are required to submit measurable outputs and will be required to submit regular reports at a quarterly basis against those defined output goals. And we have staff to make sure that we're measuring those, and we're happy to provide those to council members when requested. And we can, I anticipate that we will provide regular ARP updates to this council until the money is spent.
I anticipate, there it is, Dr. Burrs.
Gosh, Mr. Chair, Um, so do you mean outputs or impact?
So I think we are specifically requiring them to measure against outputs, but of course we also are going to have staff to really go and dive deeper into the impact question. So in order to measure this quarterly, the output does lead to impact, and so we're looking at those as leading indicators. But of course, impact's a bigger question, and we are going to be looking at that as well.
When an agency or someone applies, are they? I haven't seen the application, and I don't need to see it. This
Sure.
is just a question. Did they reply in outputs or impact?
So they had to do both. So they had to provide a narrative description of how their initiative or project or program or whatever it was going to impact the communities they are seeking to serve. And they also had to provide specific outputs that they were going to produce in order to achieve that impact.
Okay. And so just to be clear, and I think one of my colleagues maybe last year came up with this sort of analogy. There's a difference if the required impact is kids learning to read,
Mhm.
then oftentimes we would get outputs of we gave 500 books to 300 kids, and so the question was, well, great, but can they read?
Right. Yes.
And so I'm not that's what I'm talking about. Are we talking about the same thing?
We are. So
Okay.
I'm pleased to say that this isn't just something that happens on the front end either. We have a program evaluator who's really designed to measure impact, not just how the organization is going to define what their impact is, but how the city of Chattanooga defines its interest in our funding. So
Okay.
we will have, and you'll see this, we have a dedicated staff member who's going to be there to provide accountability, technical support, and coaching to all of these organizations as well. But really, it's there to protect the city, to make sure that the taxpayers are getting their money's worth, and that we are actually seeing the impact that the city would like to see, not just that the nonprofit would like to tell us.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
So finally, UHY and our grants and opportunities team are going to be providing compliance support to the administration to protect us, because the federal government could come back and request that money back if it's not spent properly. That's something we take very seriously. And UHY is doing this with cities all across the country. They know what they're doing, and they're filled with a team of experts. So we're confident in their ability. And then on our city side, the grants and opportunities team has been really diligent in making sure that information is getting collected from the subrecipients.
Jody, you answered my next question, and that was who's checking us.
That's right.
Yeah.
That would be our third-party compliance
Okay.
team.
And I think that might be important to note and understand. I want to reiterate real quick what Dr. Burrs said about impact, because I know council in the previous administration brought up the word impact, and it seemed a little bit lost in translation
Yep.
on just handing out so many widgets, as
Right.
I think is the term we were using at the time, and whether or not those widgets made an impact or a positive difference in someone's life. So appreciate that word coming back up.
Yeah, absolutely.
With these funds.
So, I think that that's why the mayor had really prioritized catalytic impact, that this is not only going to have an impact that we desire, but it will jumpstart future impact that sustains itself in the future. That was really the desire. And of course, not every single project, and I should say this from the beginning, not every single project that we fund will pan out and give us exactly what we hope for. We're thinking about this a little bit like an investor. We have to make some smart bets that are educated and thoughtful. But in order to achieve our goals, we have to take some risks as well. So what you're about to see is our allocation plan. You've received a copy that sort of provides a line item detail. And in terms of process to council, we defer to this body as to how we will move forward from here. And again, the administration would like to make sure that you were fully confident in your readiness to vote before we proceed to any vote. So we're on your timeline. But at the same time, we want to make sure that we proceed with an agreed upon allocation plan and all the subrecipient agreements being approved at once, rather than having some of them split up into different weeks. So that would be the administration's preference. So I'm going to dive into some of the categories and start reviewing the projects individually. Please stop me if you have any questions on any of these, but I'm going to take them category by category. And we're going to start with homelessness prevention and recovery, which is, go ahead.
If you'll give me just 1 second. Council, if you don't mind, I'm going to be looking at the screen, trying to follow Joda. So if you would like to speak, either raise your hand or throw something at me and I'll make sure I don't miss the small glass screen up front. Thank you.
So we're going to start with homelessness prevention and recovery. This has been a priority from the mayor from the very beginning. And to that effect, we have identified 3 key investments that are going to directly affect homelessness prevention and recovery, and I'll cover them individually. But as a city, that we are proposing and recommending to you all to approve $5.3 million, or a little over $5.3 million for homelessness prevention and recovery. The first project that we have recommended or in this presentation is the Eviction Prevention Initiative, which is a project that you all have supported already, and we're proud to say has gotten some tremendous results already in terms of supporting families in a robust way. I think 120 families a year are prevented from being evicted because of the Eviction Prevention Initiative, and it is evidence-based. There's a tremendous amount of data backing this. It is good for the landlord and the tenant that would be potentially evicted. And this has been co-funded by Pew Research, the National Center for State Courts, Footprint Foundation, the Community Foundation of Greater Chattanooga, as well as several other local philanthropic organizations. And this is key because this stops some of the flow into homelessness that becomes a much more expensive problem to solve. And so if we can solve this with adequate legal representation and get a positive outcome for landlords and the tenant alike, we are saving ourselves a lot of heartache on the back end whenever it might be turned into a problem that looks like chronic homelessness. And I think that you've heard a briefing on this in the past, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it unless you all have any particular questions.
I just want to add, Joda, because you and I have sat in on several meetings with Community Foundation, that EPI is a two-way street, not
Yep.
just a one-way channel to help prevent the situation of homelessness. And I've seen it work firsthand.
Thank you. Okay. The second project is Step Up on 2nd Street. They are a supportive services provider and they work all over the country. And I think the thing I would like to really hammer home is that they have a 97% success rate when it comes to retention. That means when they house folks and provide services to them, 97% of those folks are still housed 5 years later. It's a pretty incredible operation. The mayor and I had an opportunity to see their first site in Los Angeles, but they work all over the country. And we know that just simply handing a key to an apartment is not good enough. If we believe in a housing first approach, it is housing and supportive services. Do you have the care you need to make sure that you're getting the mental health care access? Do you have a case manager? Do you have workforce development opportunities? Somebody helping you apply for jobs? If you are disabled, have you applied for your VA benefits if you happen to be a veteran? Those kinds of things you have to have a dedicated case manager for, and that is exactly what they provide in supportive housing. They specialize in motel conversions and really work to make sure that people across the homelessness spectrum, from people struggling with mental illness all the way to folks that are maybe had been sleeping on a relative's couch but then needed that next step, they really specialize in making sure that people stay housed, which is exactly what we would like to see. So we see this as and Step Up had been previously evaluated by a number of different local organizations, and we're we're poised to get funding from efforts like the Fuse Initiative. So they're well known to the service provider community here in Chattanooga. And so we're excited about this.
So I anticipated a couple questions. Dr. Burrs, I see your light in queue first.
Thanks. So just the one thing I want to ask there is that's not housing forever, right? It's transition housing.
So it depends on the individual. So they work in lots of different contexts. So you've got folks who are, are housed and they are disabled, this is an ideal situation for them. They've got a voucher associated with them and they live peacefully in that apartment, and that's great. And they don't intend on leaving. And then they have some units that rotate out as people begin to get access to jobs and they go on to their next perhaps market rate housing, or a C&E home, for example, would be the next logical
Sure.
step. So I think there's a spectrum that Step Up operates in.
do you have any idea of the percentage of transition and the percentage of forever?
I can look into that. I don't have that on hand.
Okay. I really would like that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Burrs. Councilwoman Hill.
Thank you, Chairman. Jonah, I appreciate this presentation. It's really helpful. What are we going to be expecting Step Up to do with the $1.5 million investment? I thought I understood.
Yep.
But then I got a little confused with this bullet point about them acting as a co-developer of motel conversions, because then I started thinking about our motel. So just can you put
Yeah.
a finer point on that, please?
So I think there's an opportunity to work with them on a number of different areas. I think we are in discussions with them right now about the possibility of them being a participant on a hotel conversion that we recently purchased. But also, if that does not work out, they work with a private developer that basically goes and acquires motels without the city being required to put in a subsidy at all. And they would then purchase the building and then provide supportive housing to residents who were previously homeless. The 1.5 supports the dollars for the supportive services. So that is the entirety of the money is not for any building or capital expenses. It is simply for the supportive services. And this is something that we are in discussions with our partners at the state about. There are lots of states that provide a dedicated funding stream for supportive services. Medicaid expansion covers supportive services. Obviously, Tennessee not being a Medicaid expansion state, we have to look at other options. And so this is something that we plan on bringing up with our partners in the delegation.
Absolutely. Good, Councilwoman Hill. Thank you. Dr. Burrs again.
Yeah. How many facilities are you looking to spend this money with?
I think we could see this supporting between 1 and 3.
1 and 3?
Mhm.
Okay. Thank you.
I imagine that they have a breakdown of how much it costs per resident for a year, and I will get you that breakdown, but this provides a certain number.
The reason I'm saying
Yeah.
is I think that hopefully we're thinking about different areas of the community with maybe different performers in each one of the 3.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Burrs. And my question was related to what Councilwoman Hill, when I saw the word motel, so that was answered. Thank you.
Yep. So the next initiative that we'd be funding under homelessness prevention and recovery is a low barrier shelter. This has been one of the primary things that has been requested by the service provider community for many, many years now, for many administrations. And I think while this administration has prioritized a housing first approach, it is very difficult to coordinate and provide consistent outreach services if people are scattered to the wind and spread amongst many camps. And so the primary reason that you're seeing as many camps as you do is obviously because there's an increase in homelessness. But the problem is exacerbated by the fact that we do not have a low barrier shelter in Chattanooga. We have the rescue mission and the McClellan Family Shelter, both of which come with fairly high barriers and are limited in the number of spots. The rescue mission requires you to be at a very specific place at a very specific time. It's not handicap accessible. And the McClellan Family Shelter is very specific to the demographic it serves, and I think only has 16 or so spots. So the low barrier shelter would be a key way for us to reduce the overall number of the unsheltered population in our community.
Joda, I thought I would have several lights on this one, but one of the questions that first of all, do we know where this might be located? And the second question is, will this be an ongoing budgetary item for operation? And is that, if it is there some mechanism in place to put that into a nonprofit's hands for operation? And
yes, so we do not know where this would go yet. We are simply asking council to provide the funding to make this something that we could pursue, because we haven't vetted sites at all at this point. But yes, it would be the intention of the administration to turn this over to a nonprofit.
Okay, and we have 2.84, which is a pretty specific number.
Yes.
So I have a feeling we understand the structure that.
Yeah, so it's both understanding the kind of structure that we would have, and then also acknowledging there are other funding sources. I mentioned other ARP related sources that are not the state and local relief funds. We received some funds specifically designed to help us address homelessness, and I think we would pair that with that source of funding as well.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions?
I'm seeing none.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead and move on to our next category, which is affordable home ownership and home repairs. When Mayor Kelly made a $100 million committed to a $100 million initiative to organize funding for affordable housing, and then made a $33 million commitment, which you all approved in the previous budget, we said that it was going to be a spectrum of strategies, and that included home ownership, both preservation and opening up the access and opportunities to home ownership. These three projects provide both. So one is a purchase, rehab, resale program from CNE, and then two home repair programs that we've seen work in the past. And I'll walk you through both of those. So the purchase, rehab, resale program just simply acknowledges that right now this housing market is tremendously difficult for people trying to become a homeowner. And even when you have the budget to purchase a home in the city of Chattanooga, often you are competing against speculators and investors from out of town. And if they bid even slightly over the asking price of the home, and that exceeds the appraisal value, a bank will not finance anything above the appraisal value without some complicated financing. And this simply makes the home ownership opportunity to kind of cover the gap between how much the bank will actually finance and then the amount that's provided afterwards, or the amount that exceeds the appraisal value. This creates more opportunities for homeowners to compete against those speculative investors. And so for $1 million, we're anticipating being able to create a minimum of 20 first-time home buyers, particularly in our low-income communities. So this is really giving an opportunity for more people to enter the housing market, which is a key way of building wealth in our community. I'll go ahead and Councilman Henderson.
Yeah, thank you, Councilman Henderson.
Chief, go back one slide for just.
Yeah.
So this is the one that concerns me a little bit, in that we can create that affordable housing initially or for that first home buyer, but without having some kind of community trust that holds the deed that guarantees when that particular property is sold, it remains affordable. How are we going to address that situation?
So I think we are planning on addressing this a number of different ways through our Affordable Housing Fund. So you're right that this is not a covenant restricted program, but we do intend on pursuing I would say, expansive either land trust or deed restricted housing program that would also create some perpetuity in the affordable housing program. I think this is intentionally designed to combat a different problem, which is the cash investor problem. Particularly in communities where you're seeing a lot of speculative investors. We could talk with CNE about the asking to create covenants or deed restrictions. I will say when we do that, we are creating a ceiling on the amount of equity a home buyer, which they're going to have a mortgage. They're going to be paying for the vast majority of this home. But this caps the equity that they could, if you did a deed restriction, it caps the equity they could get out of the home. And so we see this as a wealth creation tool. And so on this particular program, we did not ask CNE to provide a cap to how much equity somebody could pull out of the home. So we are making a choice in this program not to proceed with a deed covenant. I'm happy to consider that. But then we do have some other programs that are going to do exactly what you're talking about to provide homes that are affordable in perpetuity on the home ownership side.
Okay, so I guess at some point you can do it offline. Just explain to me why this program is not capped or have some kind of restriction as to how how much percentage a homeowner could make.
Yep.
And then we're going to have others that will. I just, if we're going to create affordable housing, then we need to continue. In my
Right.
opinion, we need.
I'm happy to talk about this at length offline. It's sort of a spectrum for us, is that we do anticipate creating a number of different homeowners along the spectrum based off of how much of the overall mortgage they are willing to finance themselves. So the more that the city of Chattanooga subsidizes a homeowner, we are going to back to preserve its affordability. This is a relatively small subsidy, simply allowing low income or middle income, really 80% or below. So that, I guess, would be for somebody making $40,000 to purchase a home. They'll do the vast majority of the work. They'll put in the vast majority of the money, but we will allow them to compete with investors, which we think is better for our community. If we were to subsidize, let's say 30, 40, 50% of the mortgage, then we would obviously require the equity back, that we would cap the equity they could receive in the home. This is more of a wealth building strategy and a neighborhood preservation strategy. We do have some, C&E does put some covenants on the homes, particularly you cannot Airbnb them. I think there are some other restrictions they have put on there as well, but I can get you some more information for us to brief on this offline.
So what would make a person choose one program over the other one then?
How much home they can afford. If you can largely afford a home right now, this is a great program. And really, this just helps you compete with out-of-town investors. If you can't afford right now a home that is in a certain price range, subsidy, in which case you may be willing to accept that you aren't going to be able to realize the full appreciated value of the home when you sell it.
Okay.
Councilman, I've got 3 lights. I'm going to move to Councilwoman Coonrod.
Thank you, Chair. Joda, when we were saying 80% or less of the area of median income, like, can we get an exact number? Because
Yeah.
we all know that if you 0 to 30%, you're not going to be able to purchase a home. That
is true. Yes. If you're 30% or below, you probably would not have the financing able to purchase these homes. I can get you some numbers, plural, because it depends on the number of people that are in your house. So if if it's just one person in the household, it's going to be a lower number than if you had 4. But I can get you that table.
Yeah, thank you. I would appreciate that, because I'm gonna speak for my district, my constituents. Someone that's in that lower range, they're gonna be expecting and holding us accountable.
Sure.
So just the wording issue, but outside of, I always do a lot of work with C&E and partnerships around home ownership. But have we considered looking into other organizations like NACA that's out of Atlanta? We do also have a branch here in Memphis of people becoming homeowners. This administration, we've brought them here to Chattanooga. Several people have become homeowners, and more often with Black people that make lower income have approval chances more so than with C&E. So I would just like for us to explore other opportunities, not just with C&E.
Absolutely, Councilwoman. So what I will say is that this investment overall in this American Rescue Plan represents $13 million out of the $33 million that you all approved. And so that leaves $20 million for us to invest in other strategies. So I would love to talk about that with you and look at other options, because we certainly are open.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilwoman Hill, I see your light.
Thank you, Chair. It's a really interesting conversation, and brings the point to me how really important it is that as soon as possible we have our housing czar on staff, and that we as a elected body are able to see the plan for the overall portfolio of affordable housing tools. Because to add to the conversation, we've been approving $40,000 grants for individual habitat homes with no covenants, as far as I know. But I see that across the income spectrum, we're going to need a wide variety of tools, not just for affordable home ownership, but also for protecting our renters who more often are going to be at some of those lowest ends of the income spectrum. So I look forward to the day that we're able to meet that person and start seeing the effects of her or his work. Thank you.
Yep, we share your sense of urgency. That position just closed a couple of days ago, and we're starting interviews ASAP.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilwoman Knoll.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Joda, question. CNE is going to purchase these homes from 50,000 to 200,000. Okay. So is there a number as to how many will be purchased near the $50,000 mark versus the $200,000 mark?
I don't have those numbers right now, but assuming this gets approved, I'm happy to request that breakdown. And then I think that CNE has expressed a willingness to work with us, so we could obviously have a conversation about what our preference is. And then also, I think some of it is dependent on what the market is doing and whether or not there are buyers in that space.
Okay, because in my district as well, if it's 200,000, it's going to knock. It's going to be a null and void for District 8. So unless it's near the 50,000 or $65,000 range, that would be equal to what the income is there, then they're still not going to be able to benefit from it.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman.
Mhm.
Joda, seeing no other lights.
Okay, thank you. The next program is the home repair program through the Department of Community Development. This is a program that has been ongoing, and this simply expands the range of eligible households. And this is a part of our preservation strategy. We have an aging housing stock, and a lot of this housing stock is naturally occurring affordable housing. Doesn't require subsidy, doesn't require a pilot. These are sort of the backbone of affordable housing in our community. But we are at a serious risk of losing some of these homes as they fall into a state of disrepair. The Department of Community Development would work with homeowners to particularly the elderly, the poor, the disabled, to perform significant repairs that would extend the life of that home that would otherwise potentially result in condemnation. So this is a great project that would expand the number of families that are impacted by this program here at the city.
Councilwoman Knoll, I see your light.
Okay, question for this one. Is it income based?
I believe so. Yes, I'm almost certain you have to meet an income restriction in order to qualify for this. I can get a firm answer to you as soon as I'm out of here.
Okay, so if it is there anything that is not income based that would still be able to help those that are needing home repairs? Because I mean, income based. I know we don't set the. I know you don't set the income guidelines, but this time is $50 or $100 too much, and it knocks them out of
Sure.
that program. So I'm just wondering if we have anything else that would be able to help those that are.
So I'd encourage folks who do not qualify for this, maybe because they exceed the income limit, to reach out to the city of Chattanooga. While we may not be able to use this program because of the federal dollars associated with it on non-income restricted, we do have really great partnerships with our local financial institutions who have different programs themselves, and we could potentially help them navigate that and get access to a program that could save their home.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilman Henderson, I see your light just popped in.
So Chief, typically the dollars that economic development gets are federal dollars that have those income restrictions on
That's
them.
right.
These are ARP funds, correct?
Right. And so we would be attaching an income restriction to it, although it would not always be necessary.
Well, that was my question.
Mhm.
They don't put an income restriction on home repair programs, right?
Who's they?
The ARP funds.
No.
They say we can use them for that, but they don't attach. Is
We could,
there's leadway that we could perhaps help homeowners that maybe are just a little bit above what the federal guidelines and federal money is for the income restriction
I
on these
think-
dollars.
I think could move it beyond 80, for example, up to, I think the administration might be comfortable up to like maybe 110, 120%. So let me get back with you on that. I think there may be some issues with commingling of the other federal funds that but I want to see if from our Department of Community Development, who are really going to be the experts in the room on this, what's possible.
Thank you.
Seeing no other lights, my question, Joe, on that was if you were enrolled in the senior tax freeze program, would that make you ineligible?
See why it would, but I will happily look into that.
Thank you.
Okay, so the next home repair program is with a organization called World Changers. It's for relatively a smaller amount of money on the funding side, $60,000 investment, but it does provide quite a few homes that would be impacted by this. They bring many young people here to Chattanooga who go and work individually with homeowners to repair things around the house or conduct some repairs to maybe the electrical system or plumbing. And this is something that we've done in the past, and this continues that program. Impacts around 700 families.
Seeing no lights.
All right, thank you. All right, moving on to, oh, sorry.
Just so we know, we do have a client that is definite this afternoon that has been requested for about 15 minutes.
Absolutely.
Keep that in mind.
When would you like me to turn over back to you for attorney client? I've got probably, I've got quite a few other applications, so it's looking like we may need to schedule another.
I didn't anticipate getting through all of this today.
Okay.
So let's formulate a plan and we'll discuss that. But I think that we're definitely back on again, even if we have to call a special strategic planning
That's
session
great.
to.
Would you like me to adjourn now and turn it back over to you?
No, I think about 3:10.
Okay, great.
3:12-ish, we should be okay to.
Great. I
take
can
care
get
of
through the
some
next
attorney's
section. I think by around then.
Thank you.
So this next section is really specifically, while the last section was about home ownership, this is about creating more affordable rental projects. And so we have funded 4 different initiatives here, and you can see the amounts for a total of $5.8 million. The first project is with Kingdom Partners, which is really assembling a collection of faith-based organizations to bring them into the housing creation process. There are 1,000 acres of vacant church land in our community, and that's a huge opportunity for us to really take that cost off of the developer sheet in order to increase the affordability of a project. We have a $1.5 million into the Greater Tucker project, a $1.5 million investment into the Ames Center Espero project on Main Street, and then a $1 million investment into housing in Highland Park and in Oak Grove. And I'll detail each of those. So Kingdom Partners is brought on an experienced affordable housing developer to work with faith-based organizations to create affordable housing. And I think this does a couple of major things. In addition to the units, where we were looking at like 32 units, this also brings key staff experience and partnerships with a group of folks that have, like I said, an excess of vacant land that could be pivotal in helping us create affordable housing, and brings a new set of partners that we have never had in the effort to create affordable housing in our community. That's very exciting for this administration to have new faces in the affordable housing space, which are rooted in the communities they serve. I'm happy to stop there, but this is something that we're pretty jazzed about.
I see 2 lights. Councilwoman Coonrod, you are first.
Thank you, Chair. I'm really excited that, churches stepped up to the plate as, when our mayor asked for partnership in particular areas and they said, hey, we're excited to jump in there. I'm really excited about that. I see a couple of churches that, I visited on this list, but Is there any way, because a lot of people get overlooked with this affordable housing thing, and I get it. We all know what affordable housing is, but the particular housing that we need a lot of is the extremely low income housing, and nobody talks about that because we group everybody in into just affordable housing. Can we get a breakdown of the AMI areas that the affordable housing will be created for? Is it 80% like C&E is working on, or like the new development in the west side finna happen? Is it, 50%? Is it 0 to 30%, which
Yeah.
we need a lot of? Because that'll really help me with the affordable housing, the creation of it. Like, I want to know if it's 10 and it's 80, 5 and 50, 2 and 0 to 30, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Can we get that mapped out?
Yeah, so I think this comes to something Councilwoman Hill brought up, which is that our chief housing officer we're looking to bring on will be a pretty pivotal part of that. That said, I imagine that they don't have the breakdown of this yet because they're going to be compiling funding sources. What I will say is that in talking with our partners, there's really 3 categories of affordable housing, maybe 4. That 0 to 30% range that you're talking about is one of the projects that we have. The Sparrow project is going to target that 0 to 30%. Those are people with basically no income. It's extremely expensive, requires a tremendous amount of subsidy, and whenever we pursue those projects, they're likely not to include the private market at all because they simply can't afford it. That doesn't pencil without a tremendous amount of subsidy, and so those will always be expensive. That's not to say that we aren't going to do it, because we have one of those in here. It just requires getting really creative with the funding stream. The next is really often at that 60% AMI. You'll notice that's a common number on certain kinds of projects, and that's because that is the number required by low-income housing tax credits. If you have a LIHTC project, 60% AMI or below, so you have to earn 60% of the median income or below to qualify for those projects, and those typically come with tax-exempt bonds, low-income housing tax credits, whether 4% or 9% from the Tennessee Housing Development Agency. And we have been working really, really hard with our partners at THDA and Ralph Perry and others. I believe the chairman of the THDA now is a Chattanoogan, which is a great thing for us, to being able to bring more of those tax exempt bonds to Chattanooga. And then sort of that next tier up, that 80 to 120% is really workforce housing. These are people with incomes, but in a housing market that gets incredibly tough because, as we've seen, our housing prices rapidly grow. Even they are squeezed. The administration has an all of the above strategy. We need all of it. And the good news is that if we add housing units at the 80 to 120% range, it does have a effect of taking pressure off the housing prices further down the AMI spectrum. But absolutely, I'm happy to get you some information on the breakdown of how we see these units at the AMI level.
Councilwoman, thank you. Councilman Hester, I see your light, sir.
Joda, to the administration, thank you for being intentional. Thank you for taking calculated risks on organizations that normally are not funded. So in order to impact the community, the faith-based organization got to get in there and change the community by becoming the community. So thank you again for that.
Yeah, thank you, Councilman. And I think Mayor Kelly was excited whenever he saw the opportunity for the American Rescue Plan dollars. But of course, it took a little bit, but I think we got to a good set of recommendations. I'll move on to a project you know well, so I'm not going to spend a tremendous amount of time on it unless you have specific questions. But the city of Chattanooga knew that in addition to its rezoning application there, which was probably submitted right around the same time as this American Rescue Plan application originally, that getting a subsidy in order to dip down further into the AMI spectrum, like was mentioned before, to that 50% or 60% level was going to require subsidy from the city of Chattanooga. And so the 63 unit project is something that we do support. And again, it's an example of a faith-based partner coming into the work, and we're excited to support it.
I have a couple lights. Madam Vice Chair.
Yes. Hey, Joda. I do want to echo the sentiments of some of my colleagues in that I am glad that the faith-based organizations have stepped up, and they have not been traditionally included in a lot of these things and taking those calculated risks. So I'm excited about that. However, This particular, and I've expressed my concern about this
Yeah.
project before, so I wanted to express my concern again, simply because Penrose is involved, and I'm currently working through some things with Penrose with a current development that they are horribly managing. So I just wanted to know what their role is in receiving this $1.5 million.
Yes. So my anticipation is that Penrose would be involved in the project, but because we are now involved at a financial level, or if you approve that it would be, that gives us the opportunity to write in some pretty aggressive language into our subrecipient agreement around clawbacks and expectations. And that's something I would be excited to work with you, Councilwoman, and the rest of this body on.
Okay, because we definitely need to have clawbacks and whatever backs we need, because they are horrible. And other than that, I do like the project itself. That Penrose is just terrible. I just need that on the record. They are terrible. Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, Madam Vice Chair, how did you feel about Penrose?
They terrible.
Okay. Dr. Burrs.
So, I concur getting the faith-based community in with housing is great. This is a project that I have questions about. The 1.8 million is going for what?
This would be for the actual subsidy for the affordability of the units to get down to the 50% of AMI.
The subsidy for the affordability.
Yes, and I can get you more details
So
on
none
that.
of it is capital.
So no, this would essentially be to subsidize the affordable rents. I mean, it essentially, if you don't have it's kind of both
lot of
and. If you
money.
don't have, well, yes.
I'm thinking.
Yeah, if you don't have the subsidy, then the math for the capital project doesn't pencil. They could build the same thing and then hypothetically charge more, but in order to make the affordable rents pencil, you provide a subsidy, and that's what this is for. So yes, it ultimately does go into the construction of the building, but by subsidizing the construction of the building, you're able to get those affordable rents.
So it is capital.
Oh, it's affordable housing. It's all capital.
Okay. So when this particular group came up to us earlier, this wasn't on the table. We hadn't even gotten all the funds yet. Or did they have advanced knowledge the funds would be coming in?
I don't know when they
mean,
originally submitted their project, but of the American Rescue
Well,
Plan.
I was just based on when they were here.
Okay. Well, no. So they would have applied, I think back in, January. I think when they submitted or maybe February when they submitted their applications, when we initially opened up our application process. So it has been in the system for some time.
Okay, it's just chronology for me.
Mm-hmm.
So when they came before us for approval or whatever, they brought the project. These funds weren't involved, and they had the project, right? And it was approval for rezoning.
Right.
Okay, and so my question is just curiosity: if they already had the funds.
Oh, no. I mean, if they don't have these funds, obviously you have to approve them. I think if they do not receive these funds, they are going to have to go find this level of subsidy somewhere else.
So they didn't have the funding when they
No.
came for rezoning.
No, I imagine that they were putting the funding package together while simultaneously to them pursuing the rezoning application, which I think is fairly common.
And do we have any say-so about what this finally funds?
We can. In the subrecipient agreement, we can detail all sorts of things.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Dr. Burrs. I had a question, but I see Councilman Henderson's light ahead of me. So.
Chief, and I know we just got a few minutes, but this one just seems a little odd to me, because we were under the impression that this project was going to happen as long as the zoning went through, that they were funded through tax credits and a number of other funding sources and mechanisms this was never mentioned as part of the funding source.
Yeah.
At least I don't remember it being mentioned. And it concerns me a little bit if this is going to subsidize the affordability, unless it goes into the capital and then to paying for the project. I mean, that if it's an ongoing subsidy, then they're going to have to replace this as when that $1.8 million runs out. So I'm a little confused as to how it's actually subsidizing the affordability.
No, it
of
is
this
going into the
project.
capital. It reduces the overall cost to the project. And
So we're helping buy the building.
That's right. Yes. So it allows, and I think that the affordability period is,
But they did not have this figured in their formula to begin with, correct?
I think that the rezoning piece was totally separate from the funding piece, and I'm happy to get some more information from my colleague Jermaine, who's been more closely associated with the project. But if you were going to get to a 50 to 60% AMI project, it is going to require subsidy at some point. There's just no way to make that pencil without unless you get a 9% tax credit, which are competitive. And so it's possible that they proceeded with a plan that said, well, if we do not get any funding from the city of Chattanooga, we're going to have to apply for a 9% tax credit, which is going to be a big unknown. We don't know if we're going to get it. But there is a level of subsidy that's required to get to that level of affordability. I will say that this is not also the entire amount that was requested. We brought this down and I've told the Tucker team that they will need to go and find funding in order to close the gap. And so I believe they are going to be fundraising to close the gap on the financing side. But I can get you more specific details.
Chair.
Thank you, Councilman Henderson. Councilwoman Hill, I see your light.
Thanks. Just briefly, it is so clear that we as a council have a great deal to learn about the deep complexity of affordable housing financing. But I will say, as it relates to this Tucker Baptist project and the if-thens of the financing, to me, this is a great reminder of we always in planning and zoning, we're looking at planning the property. Or zoning the property. We're not zoning the project. So, I mean, projects like these can fall apart if the financing doesn't work. And affordable projects that ultimately protect affordability are very difficult to get financed, and they take a really long time. It doesn't surprise me that they would be reaching out to us for a portion of that. And yeah, they would have to go somewhere else to find the money otherwise.
That's right. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Joe, my comment, and I could be off base, but in thinking about the linear steps in financing. So if I think Councilman Henderson had a really good point in the $1.5 million did not exist in our conversation. And I think it's a great project. I'm glad we rezoned it. But my question is, I also at Planning Commission asked if this would be presented along with a pilot. And that also was reiterated here at council. So would we consider a pilot application made to us and coupled with the 1.5 million? Because I almost could see some issues arising out of that. Or does this remove the appetite for making application for a pilot?
So I think if we proceeded with this project, then I think we certainly would consider a pilot. Again, these are all layered strategies to bring the cost of housing down. And so it's always taking an extra cost off the developers pro forma, and that allows them to reach into deeper levels of affordability. Again, at every stage of those approvals, we have the opportunity to dictate exactly what we would like to see in exchange for that. I can also say that the pilot construction as we currently have it probably needs to be revisited, and that's something the administration has been talking about internally. But I don't think that receiving a subsidy would preclude the use of a pilot.
Okay.
In any project.
And that same question would then apply to the previous screen.
Yes.
For all of those organizations,
Yes.
faith-based organizations as well. I just want to make sure we know that option is out there and no one's shocked when.
Yeah, I would say that this
applications are
administration
made.
will likely aggressively want to use those tools.
Okay. Joda, I am seeing probably a good place to have a hard stop. So council, we will continue this. Joda, how much more time, roughly based on what we've covered today, do you think you need?
I'd say we're about a little over a third of the way through.
A third of the way through. So
Mhm.
we're going to need another. And time wise, what kind of timeline are we needing?
You know,
to
I would
be on?
certainly love to schedule an ad hoc strategic planning meeting for the following week in order to see how much we can get through this. So that way we aren't unnecessarily waiting for a period of time if that's something that the council's comfortable with.
Madam Vice Chair, I see your light.
I just had a question about the timeline here. Would we be able to do it earlier? Like, I know this is formatted like the budget sessions were. So would we be able to do an earlier time so that we can, because I know no one wants to sit, well, I can't speak for everybody. I don't want to sit through weeks and weeks of 2 or 3 presentations,
Sure.
or whatever. So will we be able to do a, earlier time, maybe next week or in the next 2 weeks, maybe a 10, 10:30, 11 or something like that?
Are you anticipating, Joda, accomplishing the rest of it in one sitting? Because Madam Vice Chair makes a really good.
I can, absolutely. So if we started, say, at like 10 or 10:30, we could probably power through that and get through the entire presentation.
Okay, well, let me take the temperature on that for next Tuesday. I'm assuming that is the date that you're going to want to do that. Is there any objection? I know that is putting some folks on the spot to us continuing this next week at 10:30. And I understand that some may not be able to be here on work schedules. I am not seeing any objection. So, Madam Clerk, would you please put a specially called strategic planning session specifically to address the ARP funds for next Tuesday in chambers at 10:30?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right. I do have a couple of items, if you don't mind, Joda, that I needed to cover before we head over to the conference room. One, I do not want us to forget the library. That was a major point of conversation during budget season. And I believe you do have a date for us
Yes.
with a report.
Yes, we would like to have that the first council session in October. We feel like we will have a robust update for each of you, and then that will allow the maturity of our conversations with the delegation to proceed. I think right now we would really appreciate that time to hammer some things down.
Sure. And I understand you'll have substantial information to share at that point.
That's right.
So that will be either October 1st. Is that what our target date?
I'm not exactly certain if
It's okay. I've got TBD, but
Yeah.
I just want to make sure
it's whatever that first Tuesday of October
Okay.
is, the October 3rd.
And then our purchasing process with Mr. Goldberg, I do have scheduled for an August strategic planning session. And then results of the RFP evaluation with Dr. Bird's name next to that, also in strategic planning in October.
I'm also happy to make sure that Brent comes, and I love assigning him things.
He's
So
a
that
little,
sounds great.
we've got him a little busy right now, but I do want to make sure that those items are mentioned on the record and that we have not let them slide by us.
Nope, I've
just
got 'em.
with the moving into budget. So, okay, we will now move into an attorney-client. If I can get everybody to come to the, after, of course, Councilwoman Coonrod says something.
Thank you, Chair. Just really quick, not for Joda, but Jermaine and I have been speaking about the Workforce Development Department. Would like to get on a committee schedule for workforce, for him to give us a presentation on what's been going on, what's the plan. Because I'm not going to go into details, but
I understand.
we need to.
Let's pick that time.
Yes.
I'll be glad to
Okay.
work with you on that.
Thank
Thank you. So if we could adjourn to the conference room pretty quickly, that would be great. Thank you.